There's something I'm really concerned about. It affects all the children of Hamilton County, and in that way, it affects everybody who lives in Hamilton County. Did you know that only 31% of our third graders are ready to learn to read? That's scary, because when you find out about how education works, if you can't read in 4th and 5th and 6th grade and on, you fall through the cracks. And when you fall through the cracks, you fall into poverty, joblessness, and the whole series of social ills that cause society problems, cause personal problems, cause family problems, cause all kinds of problems. So we want to do everything we can to help people get ready for their children to learn to read, their grandchildren to learn to read, and for the county to accept the responsibilities to teach reading in a scientific manner. It's not an art, it's a science.
I'm Thankful Davis for Hamilton Flourishing, and I'm here with Sarah Powell, and we're going to talk about what it means to be kindergarten ready. Sarah, thank you so much for coming. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Thankful, thank you for having me. I am a licensed occupational therapist. I have focused most of my career on pediatrics. We work with children birth through teenage years with a major concentration in preschool and elementary age students. I also have 3 of my own children, so a little bit of therapy goes on at the house as well.
Always. I know how that goes being a mom. So what would you say are some skills that are necessary? What does that really mean for a child to come ready for kindergarten? They've done maybe preschool, or maybe they haven't, but what skills do they need, and what does that really look like?
Well, there's a lot of skills that need to be in place to get to kindergarten, and one of the things that we always look at is strength and postural control in general, but all of those skills, well, let me back up. We look at multiple skills for kids to be ready for kindergarten. Those skills that we're looking at, and I will list those in a minute, are things that start as early as at birth.
Yeah.
So we want children to have a strong core. Well, that doesn't start when you're 2 months out from kindergarten. That starts when you're a baby and having tummy time.
Right.
Or when you're a toddler and allowed to play on a playground that has hills and crawl and roll and all those kinds of things. So besides strength and postural control, we also look at right-left dominance. So we want kids to have developed hand dominance, and that occurs usually through different activities like crawling, so as early as 8 months. And then you could even look at some skills that they would acquire, learning to play, to jump with 2 feet, or hop over a
stand
a
on
rock.
1 foot.
Yeah, stand on 1 foot. All of those things help with that right and left coordination.
Yeah.
As they get older, skipping or riding a tricycle or a big wheel are great activities. And then we also look at
I want to stop you and go back to something that you said, just kind of about play. And I was thinking of this example with my pre-K class. We were all on the trail. We have a trail at my school, and that a lot of the kids, several of them, were having trouble just balancing, walking on uneven terrain. And
Yes.
I thought, man, this is so important to get out
and explore the environment.
Right.
Yes, because if you look at an infant, toddler, in those younger years, children are learning through movement, and they're learning through touch and tactile experience. And so as many opportunities like that as kids can have, it strengthens all those skills that we need to see in kindergarten. We have a list of motor skills we're going to show you that I think are important to think about. So we talked about strength for seated, core strength. That when you get to kindergarten, you need that core strength because you need to be able to sit in a seat.
Right.
You need to be able to complete tasks, kindergarten appropriate tasks, whatever those are. We see lots of children that are up and down in their chair, and they can't come to the table to learn. So that puts them behind if they just don't have that core strength. And they need to be able to sit to be able to use their right and left hand together, and to be able to manipulate different fine motor games and toys. puzzles, things like that, different kinds of games. And then hand dominance, we talked about a little bit, but we really want to see a developed hand dominance by the time kids are in kindergarten.
Right.
If both sides of the body are wanting to be dominant, then neither does a very good job at it. So we really want to see one side of your brain specialize. So that right side or left side needs to sort of take over. So when they pick up their spoon or they pick up their writing tool or their scissors, they would always go with the same side.
hand.
If you have kids that are confusing those sides, that can be a little bit of a conundrum in their brain, and it also can cause a delay because neither side is getting very good at what they need to be able to do to then be able to do academic tasks as they approach kindergarten.
I didn't even think about that because that seems to come.
Yeah, I'm sure you see that in your classroom.
But sometimes, like, okay, well, let's switch it over to the right side to use the scissors.
Well, and it's great. It's great to practice things with both sides of your body.
Right.
But we want to see that little Joey is picking up his spoon with his right hand all the time.
Okay.
He's not picking it up. So say mom sets it down on the left side of the table. If it's on the left side, does he pick it up with his right hand and cross over his midline, or is he always picking up on the side it's on? So we really want him to have a dominance, but it's great to incorporate both sides into activities as well.
Like you said, crossing that midline, do you want to talk about that? Just address how important that is?
That's super important, and that is a skill that we see kids develop really strongly through crawling and play.
Right. Yeah.
So if you think about crawling, it's a very complex motor task. So you've got your right and your left side of your body and your upper and lower extremities. And with crawling, you're doing a lot of work, both you're coordinating a lot of different movements to then help that right and left side of the brain talk.
Right. Because you're thinking, okay.
Yes. So you've got your right side going one way, your left, and then your lowers are doing the opposite. So
and
that's very
important.
complex. And you think kids are babies, they're 8 months when they learn that, some even younger. But that is a great way to get that right and left side talking. And I have a lot of kids that I work with that the families might put on their intake that they've never crawled. And there's some things that we'll see.
So you have to go back.
Encourage crawling.
Right?
Yes, we go back and try to...
And crawling the right way.
Yes, crawling the right way.
With your right hand and your left hand.
Yeah, we have a lot of kids that bottom scoot or commando crawl.
Right.
And those, the commando crawl, you're still using your right and left side of your upper body, but you're not incorporating your lower.
And so you're not
extremities.
really crossing the midline of your brain to get those two to talk and coordinate.
Yes. So the other thing about crawling that's really interesting is the distance from your eyes to the floor is the distance that you will use when you start reading. It's the same relative distance.
That's so interesting.
So that also helps with eye-hand coordination and that kind of thing. So
and
also
even your
with
visualization, right?
Yep,
When
and
you're
then
looking
your
at that page.
neck muscles. It helps strengthen your neck muscles. And you think about sitting here. Even sitting here, we're using our muscles to hold us upright.
Right.
If we didn't have a strong core, one of us would be slumping or kind of fidgety to keep ourselves, in the same place.
Do you want to go back to the slide?
Yeah, let's look at that slide again and make sure we didn't miss anything. Oh, a big one that I think we forget to talk about is giving kids or helping kids learn and their relationship to space. So some kids are unaware of where their body is in space.
Yeah.
And one way to do that is to talk them through. So we'll talk about it in a minute. A language-rich environment is super helpful. You can do this through books. You can do this through just auditory input for them. But, hey, Joey, I see that your book is over there on top of the bookshelf. Can you bring it back over to me? So he's thinking of on top of. You can... I'm trying to think of another good example. You might have a child...
even looking out the car window.
The car window, we talked about that.
Look what's underneath the bridge.
Yes. Or look where, kids nowadays aren't looking where they're going as much because they're using more devices in the car. But having that spatial awareness and the orientation and, knowing your right and left.
Yeah.
And that's not dominance. That's being aware of which way's right and which way's left, which way's up, which way's down. I'm going to put ketchup on top of your French fries, or I'm going to put your ketchup next to your French fries.
Yes.
Or, just using that language constantly to give them that frame of reference. On top of, above, below, next to, beneath, to the right of as they get older, to the left of. Can you put this on your shoe? Just different ways to use that language, and you can use it as a parent very regularly because you're constantly giving direction.
Yes, right.
So just throwing in some extra descriptors, and the more language they hear, the more they'll be able to tackle what those things are. But then you're also giving them a good
vocabulary
and a good frame of reference for direction and space.
Yeah.
And another way is just knowing where their body is by playing and moving and rolling around and roughhousing and climbing things and doing cartwheels and doing forward rolls and tumbling, all those kinds of things, walking, stepping from rock to rock outdoors, or just being active in those kinds of things. They're figuring out their relationship to their body. So, hey, I know if I put my foot on this rock, that surface is a little uneasy and my body's going to sway. If I put my foot on this flat surface, I'll probably be more solid to the ground.
I just was thinking of that quote, play is the work of children,
Yes,
and
it is.
Just how that's so important. Like, play is so essential to development. You may think, we've got to have this activity and this next activity, but that play is huge.
So, and I play constantly with kids, and that's my
so
job, is
fun.
to play with kids. Yes. So, parents' jobs aren't necessarily too hard if you consider, we just need to give them lots of opportunities to play, as much as when they're little. And even as they get in the older grades, I like to see that too, because they need a little bit of a brain break. But especially when they're little, we want to see a lot of movement opportunities and maybe some outdoor play, and there's so many great playgrounds in this town. Just headed out to the playground, and even if it's raining, put your raincoat on and go splash in puddles. Just lots of providing more opportunities just helps enrich everything that they need to be ready for kindergarten, really.
Yeah, and that's pretty easy, and you don't have to pay anything to go to the playground. So I like those kind of tips.
Yes, and I don't know who sells them still, but I love a big wheel. Like, get a big wheel at a yard sale and let them ride. And some kids may not want to do a tricycle, so a big wheel might be easier. Or they may love a tricycle, but just going around the block or going down the street, that's great opportunity for kids too. So movement is
so those
really
are those
key.
Those
are a lot of the motor things that we look at.
What would we? So we need those. Then what's another piece of this as we're moving?
Well, we look at to be ready for kindergarten. Some of the other things we think about are comprehension, and we've got a list to show y'all that is helpful. But when we're looking at comprehension, we look at how they relate to words for time. Like, do they understand yesterday, today, and tomorrow? Do they know their days of the week? Are they talking about that kind of thing regularly? That's another thing you can add into your conversations in the car, and just keeping that constant conversation. What is it that you had for lunch yesterday? Okay, that's great. I wonder what they're having tomorrow at school. Like, giving them that frame of reference. I have had several students that can't figure out the difference between yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So the way that gets easier is if it's a conversation that's happening. We have, the how questions. So how are you going to put those two Legos together? Or how are, I'm trying to think of some good place.
So, like, with play?
Yeah, just using questions in there, constantly using questions with them to see how things are going.
Like, what are they thinking about their thinking, kind
how
of?
Are you
almost
put that
like
together?
that metacognition.
Yeah. How do you suppose we're going to run your bath? How are you going to, how are you going to pick your toy today? Or what toy are you going to pick today? I mean, just kind of I think as parents we get so busy. I know for me, I've gotten so busy where we just rush through things.
Right.
And so just keeping the conversation going and talking a lot, using different types of questions, and giving them some more complex instructions are good. So if you see that they can follow simple instructions like, okay, I need you to put your shoes on and meet me at the door, you could say, I need you to put your shoes on, meet me at the door, and we're going to walk outside. I want you to grab your bike or bike helmet, whatever. So just adding to those instructions as you see they're mastering them, adding things in.
I want to go back to that how question for a second. And I was just kind of, that spurred something in me thinking about that learned helplessness when you're like, okay, you're in such a hurry. I'll put on your shoes.
Yes.
So maybe like, how will you put your shirt on today? If it's a button-up shirt, then you're going to have to unbutton those buttons.
Yeah.
If it's, has a
I think
zipper,
that's great.
That just kind of spurred that in me, thinking about us being so busy and
and
being in a hurry.
I think as parents, we anticipate our children's needs because, that's our role. Our main role with them is to help them. But sometimes helping them is doing less rather than doing more.
Yeah, even though it takes extra time.
You have to add time to your day. You might have to get up a couple minutes early, but I will say that in the long run, you will get out the house. If it's morning routine, you would get out of the house faster, or whatever it is that you are having to slow down for. Eventually, they'll be more independent and be able to do it.
And it's so important to know how to do, because then it's like when you get to first grade or second grade and you don't know how to tie your shoes or button up your pants or all those
things.
Sets
you apart from your peers.
It really does, and it makes it harder for you, because then you're having to go talk to the teacher. Can you button my pants?
And they feel behind.
Right.
Yes. And there is the social emotional piece of development. You really want kids to find something that they can feel really confident about, that they've mastered, and so that they can kind of take that little success and then add more on top of that. But if they feel defeated because I can't tie my shoes but the rest of the kids can, or I
can't button my pants.
That's a big one. So it's great to encourage all of that. And I always say, work on motor skills. We're talking about kindergarten readiness. A great way to work on motor skills is have kids put their clothes on themselves.
Right.
If you're using your right and your left side of your body, you're having to use your upper and lower extremities differently. You're having to use do fasteners. You're having to use spatial orientation, because you've got to figure out which part do I put my body in, like what's the front, what's the back. Shoes. I have lots of kids that put their shoes on the opposite feet.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's an easy way to coordinate that in.
And then it also helps your routine, because you obviously
don't have to do it.
Get out the door quicker. I know that's a big thing in our house, especially when my children were younger.
Yeah, it still is for us. So okay, back to our
and so the other one, when we think about comprehension, we want kids to be able to discriminate between like and different. And I'm thinking about symbols here. I'm thinking about shapes. I'm thinking about pre-reading, recognizing letters, recognizing numbers. If they can't tell the difference between, two basic shapes like a square and a triangle, they're probably not going to be able to tell the difference between an X and a Y. So we really want
a B and a D.
Yeah, we really, for sure, not a B and a D.
Right.
We really want them to be able to discriminate between some basic things, and you can do that with puzzles. You can do that with any of their toys, any manipulatives. Well, this one's a circle. This one's what shape is this? Which ones are the same? Like, there's so many games.
We did that with blocks a lot, because we'd be like, okay, let's build something now with get all the rectangles over here and all the circles, and then build something with we need 3 circles, and so that was one way we kind of did that.
And I think that's great. There's so many great toys out there that kids, you can have that dialogue with, and it's not maybe even intended for that, but discriminating between things is a huge part of your visual system. And if you can master that, or kids have a sense of that, well, think about how much easier it is for when they get to kindergarten and they have to start looking at these 26 letters of the alphabet and figure out how they're different, what is what,
and what sounds they make. Then it really gets
then you add in the sounds.
So okay, going back to our comprehension, what would you say?
So the multi-step auditory directions, we kind of talked about that with the complex instructions. But it is nice to know that kids are following your voice cues instead of like following, say you've got another child in the house that is a leader or that's older and modeling behavior. We want them to do that, but we also want them to be able to follow instructions so that that are given to them orally. So, and in a classroom, this sometimes is harder because teachers do have so many visual supports, and some families probably have visual supports they don't realize are there. But just checking in to make sure, kind of testing them every once in a while to see, okay, are they able to follow these instructions?
Do they hold that in their mind?
Are they able to hold it and follow through with it, or do they get stuck after 2? Do they get stuck after 1 or 2 or 3? Then it's, well, let's try to build on that. And keep it simple, but just keep adding and see what they can do. And you may have times when they've slept well, they're having a great day, and they can follow 4. And then you may have days where they just haven't had a good night's rest and
didn't eat lunch,
and they can't even get through 1. So I would just look at over the course of a week or 2, are they able to do it? If you're comparing time to time, but sometimes you'll get with kids especially, you'll get a different read from day to day. Yes, for sure.
Absolutely. So we talked about comprehension. We've talked about motor skills. What would be kind of the other cornerstone of this?
Thinking in terms of reading and being ready for kindergarten, we just talked about naming and recognizing letters and numbers, and that includes recognizing the sounds of the letters too. Also, being able to tell a story and using more complex sentence structures. They can talk in different ways depending on the listener and the place. So they can relate to their peers and have a conversation, or they can come in and see Miss Thankful and they can ask you a question as a different type of person in a different setting. So you're an adult that is that could answer a question as a teacher, but can they relate to different peers and different not different peers, different people in different settings. So we have children that may only be able to relate to adults.
Okay. And why would that be important in a pre-reading skill that they need?
I think for readiness, I think that play is such an important part of kindergarten, and then being able to cooperatively play with their peers is so helpful.
So that's huge.
Just to enrich their experience.
Yeah.
I think that would be. I feel like that's just
I do think that's
around
important.
Everything, like for everything, all things kindergarten. I think being able to interact with their peers, have conversations, play cooperatively. And, they would need that in a small group.
Absolutely.
They would need that in a big group setting when the teacher's doing things in a circle time or morning meeting. So thinking in terms of, like, how do they look in a big group of kids versus...
Because they're going to have to wait
some kids will look...
bit.
Yes, they're going to have to be patient. They're going to have to be able to sit in one place.
Right.
And maybe not a really long time, but, 5, 10, 15 minutes. Yeah. They're going to have to be able to listen to the instructions. They're going to have to be able to... respect their peers' personal space. So I think that I would say that's sort of an outlier for the reading piece, but definitely important for just kindergarten readiness. And we just know that if kids are engaged with their peers and their teachers, that they're going to learn more.
Yeah.
So, and then thinking about sounds. So the output of speech, and this certainly isn't my area of expertise, but as a pediatric therapist, we cross over a whole bunch. But at age 5, you would have all sounds mastered except for the TH, so the th sound and the R sound. And then same at 6, you would have all sounds mastered except for the TH. And if those aren't in place, then that might be a red flag that we need to do some sort of speech therapy.
Yeah. So by age 5, at that point you would be like, no, it's not. It's
yes.
So a tip for parents would be to go back and correct every time or most of the time.
I think that would be a better question for a speech therapist, but I do think that most schools have a screening process, and those speech sounds are caught pretty easily, and so I think I would, if there was concern, I would try to find a professional that knew more about how to make sure we're on the right path. Some kids are just slower to learn, and it doesn't mean they're not as smart. It just means they're learning at their pace. So we always have to be mindful of that.
And I've noticed if you don't eventually correct, like it's kind of cute for a lot of kids. You're like, oh, like they have such a sweet little speech pattern.
I've done
and
that
so then
before.
it gets to a point where you're like, okay, well now we need to
and we don't
it.
want that to keep going because we don't want habits to form.
Yeah.
So we want to be thoughtful about, okay, and there's tons of lists out there about speech sounds and when they should be typical. But if there is an atypical pattern, we don't want to reinforce it by trying to say it like them or repeat after them.
Right.
We want to model the correct way.
Yeah.
And the hope is that they would see us do that and then try to click in and be able to do it. And if they can't, sometimes there could be a motor skill or a mechanical issue that they could address with a speech therapist.
So thinking about these are the things that we need. What happens when there is a child who maybe isn't ready? What are some deficits that you're seeing, or some things that maybe because we haven't had enough play, we've spent too much time on a screen, or we haven't interacted well with our peers? What are some things that you're seeing, and how can parents help? Kind of maybe this is a more modern problem because we do use screens so much. There's screens in our car, and what are some things that you're seeing, and how can we as parents
the thing
do better?
For me as a parent, but me also as a clinician, I think that my shtick, I guess, is that screens, and we'll talk about all of that, but screens are on my mind right now. Screens in and of themselves are not bad,
right?
But they're robbing children and teenagers and adults of opportunities to connect with people, to move around and play, to explore their environment, to have a hands-on experiences. And so say your child is 2 and they use a screen for 3 hours a day, well, that's 3 hours that they didn't have the opportunity to crawl and move and run and play and explore and make some connections on something that they just hadn't seen before, because kids' brains are changing so fast and they're so much more inquisitive than, as a 3-year-old than you probably are as a 23-year-old, that it's such an optimal time to learn.
Yeah.
But if you're just on a device, now there's things that can be learned from devices, and kids this generation will have devices in their lives forever.
Right.
And so they need to understand them and know them, but it's also kind of trying to strike that balance so they do have the opportunities to play.
I love how you worded it, that it's taking away an opportunity. It's not bad, but this could be filled with something else that is going to be more beneficial and maybe more conducive to building those pre-reading
pathways.
skills.
I mean, you think the brain changes so much from age 3 to 7. There's so many opportunities to build those pathways, and we don't want to lose those opportunities because of screen time. Now, I have 3 children and they use screens, but we try to keep an eye on it and make sure that we are limiting it to a healthy for each of them is different and is different at different stages. So I think just being mindful and looking at the literature. I know the American Academy of Pediatrics, I think they say 2 hours or less of screen time a day, beginning at age 2, I believe. So, I mean, I know when a kid comes in for an evaluation and they know how to swipe on my phone, but they can't pick up a block, that we've got a little bit of a problem.
Yeah.
So we definitely want to expose them. And I know as a parent, when my kids were little, I would get Tupperware or Rubbermaid containers, whatever, get containers out and let them match lids, things like that. It doesn't have to be a fancy toy always. It just needs to be an opportunity to make, for the container example I just gave, it gives them an opportunity to say, okay, this matches this. These two fit together, or this one fits inside this one. Just playing and exploring and leaving them to their own devices and letting them find something fun to play with. It doesn't have to be a fancy toy that you bought at the toy store. It could be, my kids loved to play with cotton balls and things like that when they were little.
Yeah.
And, sticks. We would make our letters with sticks on the driveway. Lots of sidewalk chalk at our house when they were growing up. So there's lots of things that are out there that they can have so much fun with. And especially if we as parents kind of step back and follow their lead. And I have 3 children that all learn very differently, so they definitely were drawn to different things.
Yeah. Are there any other things that you can say other than just the screen time, the deficits?
Yes, I think kids are not playing outside as much, and so I always try to encourage folks, not everybody's neighborhood is conducive to outdoor play. And not everybody's schedule is conducive to outdoor play, because if both parents are working and they get home late, it might be too dark when they get home, or they may be working on homework together when they get home. But trying to squeeze those opportunities in as best as you can is going to be awesome, to give those kids, all kids, the opportunity to move and to explore their environment. And that just helps with so much of the academic piece when they get to kindergarten, that they've got experiences to draw from. It's not just that they've been,
inside or on the screen.
Yes.
Someone the other day said, and it was a quote from someone else, but the importance of boredom, and they boredom is essential.
It is.
I was like, that's so good to remember, because we want our kids to.
I think as
parents,
keep going,
we
try to fill in that space a lot, and it's nice to step back and say, "Hey,
figure something out."
Or I usually say, if you're bored, I've got I need the dishwasher emptied, and everybody finds something to do real quick. At our house.
That could even be a good sorting skill.
Yes,
there.
It is a good sorting skill. Yes, and sometimes they try to do it really fast, so that's like a good, motor skill. What's the word? Just trying to get it done quick, so they kind of race each other. But anyway, I think the other thing that we're seeing as far as deficits, the two big things I think are screen time, and then missing out on opportunities to play, but also reading to kids. I know they can't read before. They usually can't read before kindergarten. Some kids can, but as they're 1, 2, 3, reading books to them and using that as an opportunity to say, you could read the book and then have them tell you something about the pictures in the book. So if kids aren't having those opportunities, they get to school, they're just behind their peers who have had that, because they haven't even been asked those kind of questions to have to sort of dig to figure out, what it is that how to answer that. So they're behind the 8 ball, really, because they haven't had the opportunity. So
that's huge. Just that opportunity.
Opportunity alone. And it doesn't have to be, I know when my children were younger, we would read the same book over and over. You don't have to have 4 gazillion books at your house. We also loved, and I have always encouraged the families I work with to use the public library. The downtown library is the one we've been to the most, and it has so many great resources, but also lots of books. So lots of opportunities there. But as far as deficits, I would say we just see kids that are lagging further and further behind. So maybe the way they're holding their pencil doesn't look the same as their peers, or maybe the way they are navigating walking on uneven surfaces like the path, or maybe having a conversation with a teacher is behind because they haven't had those opportunities. So really providing an environment that's language rich, that's movement opportunity rich, and that gives them those opportunities to learn more, I think is the best way to get at all that.
I think you summed it up really well. Is there anything, final kind of advice or thoughts that you would like to share kind of in closing to parents?
Well, I would say for parents, I would want all parents to hear that, none of us are perfect, but we can be the perfect parent for that child, and that we really want to just get to know our kids, follow their lead, give them opportunities. And when, I've said the word opportunities 40 times, I think, in the last 20 minutes, but opportunities can be very small. Like, it could be crawling into the cupboard with the containers. It could be taking a walk on a trail. It doesn't have to be anything too crazy, but just spending that time with them and the opportunities, I think that's huge. And so I think our world, we have so many things telling us how we should be and
Yeah.
what it should look like, and it's your way. You get to decide what it looks like. But I think to do our due diligence with our children is to just support their development by following their lead and giving them lots of chances to try new things.
I love that. I think that's an easy opportunity.
Yes.
That's great.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
with us, Sarah. We appreciate all your insight. And thank you. This has been Thankful Davis with Hamilton Flourishing.
If you like this video, please subscribe. Be sure to click the bell so you'll receive notification when we release a new video. Be sure to go to our website, www.hamiltonflourishing.org, for more information.